Okay, picture this. It's 2 a.m., and you've got a massive exam in just a few hours. You're cramming harder than you have all semester, probably fueled by a ton of caffeine and a little bit of panic. We like to call that last-minute push productivity, right? But what if that deadline is actually doing something, well, something really weird to our motivation?
I mean, we've all been there. But what's really happening in our brains when we're in that mode? You'd think it's simple. The closer the deadline, the more motivated we get. But a really fascinating study suggests the opposite might be true. What if all that frantic studying is actually a warning sign that our best, most valuable kind of motivation is just disappearing?
So, check this out. Researchers followed a group of university students and found this incredible paradox. As their exam got closer, the amount of time they spent studying went through the roof. I mean, no surprise there. But here's the wild part. At the exact same time, their confidence and their sense of the exam's importance, two of the biggest drivers of motivation, were actually going down. More hours, but worse motivation. How is that even possible? To solve this puzzle, we have to understand that motivation isn't just one thing. We've got to look at it in two ways. Not just how much of it we have, but also what kind of motivation is pushing us forward.
First, let's talk about motivation quantity. You can just think of this as the raw amount of drive you have. It's basically a mix of two key things. Expectancy, which is your confidence, that I can do this feeling. And value, which is how important success is to you. Logically, you'd think both of those would be sky high before a big test.
But here's what the study found. As the exam got closer, both the students' confidence and how important they felt the exam was started to decline. So think about that. Even as they were putting in more and more hours, the actual quantity of their positive motivation was shrinking.
So, if the amount of good motivation is dropping, what on earth is fueling all those extra study hours? Well, the answer is in the motivation's quality. It's about the reason why you're motivated in the first place. Are you studying to win, or are you just studying to avoid losing?
Psychologists kind of split this into two types. You've got performance approach motivation, that's all about striving for success, studying to prove you know your stuff. But then there's performance avoidance, and that's all about escaping failure. You're studying just so you don't look bad. One is fueled by ambition, the other is fueled by fear.
And that shift is exactly what the researchers found. As that deadline loomed, students weren't studying to win anymore, they were studying not to lose. Their motivation completely transformed from this positive pursuit of success into a desperate flight from failure.
So, what happens when fear takes over and becomes the main motivator? Well, it doesn't just change how students feel, it fundamentally changes how they work.
The data here is crystal clear. Deadlines make us work. In the first week of the study, students were averaging about 1.5 hours of study time for this exam. By week 8, right before the test, that number had jumped to nearly 7 hours. That's more than a 4-fold increase.
But here's the real question. Is all study time created equal? Is an hour of studying in week 1 the same as a frantic hour in week 8? The research says absolutely not. The quality of that effort changes dramatically.
This all comes down to two different ways of learning. There's deep learning, which is about really understanding things, connecting ideas, building knowledge that lasts. And then there's surface learning, which is classic cramming. It's just memorizing isolated facts long enough to pass the test. As the exam got closer, students used more of both strategies. But their use of surface learning, that pure memorization, grew way faster. It makes sense, right? When you're running on fear, you don't try to build a better boat. You just frantically patch the holes so it doesn't sink.
This intense focus also shifts the battles going on inside our own heads. Early on, students felt what they called should conflicts, that nagging guilt that they should be studying. But as the real cramming began, that guilt disappeared. It was replaced by overwhelming want conflicts, that feeling of wanting to be doing anything else. The guilt was gone, but so was any joy in the work.
So, let's put it all together. You've got more hours, but it's fear-based motivation. You're studying more, but it's less effective learning. It all points to the same conclusion, the double-edged nature of a deadline. Look, deadlines are effective. There's no doubt about it. They force us to act. But this research really shows that they're a double-edged sword for our motivation. They get us to the finish line, for sure, but we have to ask at what cost to how we feel and what we actually learn. Let's just quickly recap the real costs of cramming.
Your motivation shifts from being success-driven to being fear-driven. Your learning shifts from deep understanding to just shallow memorization, and the work itself becomes something you desperately want to escape.
So we're left with this big question. We rely on deadlines to get things done, all the time. But is that productivity coming at a hidden cost to our motivation and our learning? This study really makes you wonder if there's a better way. It's definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself pulling that all-nighter.